The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We've got a great show for you today with a great guest, someone that I respect and admire so much. I'm talking about Marcy Fibrow. She's an amazing clinician, and she's going to be with us to talk a little bit about autism and school from a BCBA perspective, things that we need to know, jargon terms that we need to know, rights we need to know. She's amazing, you guys. She has illuminated for me things that I did not know, so you're going to love her. But before we do that, we have some things to take care of. So thrilled that you guys have been with us this whole month of April. Man, it's dizzying how many people we've had on the show. I want you to know it doesn't end with April. We've got great people coming up the rest of this. We still have a week left today, but amazing guests. But then it continues in May. We've already opened up our calendar for May, June, and July. And we're booking people left, right, and center. So it's really wonderful guests coming up. I especially want to remind you that tomorrow Jen Yakos will be with us, and she is, oh my gosh, so fabulous. Then on Friday, we have Christine and Abby Romeo from Love on the Spectrum US. They're hilarious. You're going to love them. Monday is Vince Redman. He's going to be talking about the feelings that we have as we're fighting for services and trying to show up for our kids. And sometimes it can be a lot. So we're going to talk with Vince about that. And then for our final show of the month on Tuesday, not our final show of the year, it's just for the month of April, we'll have Dr. Grant Bichet back to talk about building language. So that'll be really wonderful. So all of that coming up. Now, we like to remind you that the show is live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is a pre-recorded show. You can be writing in questions, but I need you to know that it is pre-recorded. But hopefully I'll be watching and be able to answer any questions that I can. And I will always check them. So there's that. But also want to let you know that the show is available later on as a free download wherever you get your podcasts. Also on our YouTube channel, all of the shows that we've done over the last 14 years are archived. I mean, you want to see what I looked like when my hair was dark? It's there. I have gone gray during the time that we've been doing this. So there's that as well. But we hope that you'll check that out. I want to always remind you that we know that most of you, the lion's share of our audience is listening in podcast. And for those of you who are listening in podcast, you're also hearing regular advertisements that will cut into the podcast because that's the podcast deal. I was saying this to somebody the other day and they were like, really? I didn't realize this, that it actually costs money when you download the podcast. There is a cost associated with that. And that's how we get it free to you, is by those sponsors being there. Now, if you find that you're running and it's just annoying to have the ads there and you're like, I would pay a little bit to not have to have them, you absolutely can. We made that possible for you at glow.fm/autismlive. It's $5 a month and you get all of the podcasts that we do on the Autism Network. So that includes Autism Live, Ask Dr. Doreen, all of the podcasts that we're incubating, everything for that low $5 a month. It's actually cheaper if you do it across the year. So that is available to you if you're not loving the ads. But I hope you do love the ads because that's what's making it free for you. So there you go. Always want to remind you that our whole purpose here at Autism Network is to provide information and inspiration to that larger autism community. That starts with individuals who are themselves on the autism spectrum. We want to hear from them. We want to create a platform that is safe for them to say all the things that we need to hear. It's very individual. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We want to hear, and hopefully you see that in this month of April, we've tried to really make a stage for those individuals to have the opportunity to speak and be heard. But we also include in that larger community everyone who loves individuals on the spectrum, everybody who's wanting to support them, because there are times and situations when they're at most IEPs, there certainly are IEPs for kids that are older where they are given the opportunity to not only attend their IEP, but be a voice at their IEP. We're always working towards that. But if you have a 3-year-old, that's probably not going to be appropriate for the 3-year-old to be the person who is advocating for themselves. Are we going to teach that? Sure. But there's a period of time as a parent where it is your responsibility to go in and be your child's advocate at those IEP meetings. And you need support for that, because I didn't go to school for that. I didn't know what to do at those things. It's like something you need to learn. So we have shows for those folks as well to help support those individuals. So that's what we're all about here. And to that end, at the start of many of our shows, we like to do the jargon of the day, where we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are those experts talking about. We give you an actual definition. Sometimes I make fun of it, sometimes I don't. Then we always try to give you a second definition, which I call the working definition, which I hope is a little bit more accessible and not packed with even more jargon. But always we try to give you an example of why might this term be important to you today. How might this help you to get to better communication, better circumstances, right? So today's jargon term, and it's not one that we do a lot because kind of we talk about this all the time and we just don't talk about what it's called. And it's called the Premack Principle. Okay, it sounds like something that's going to determine liftoff for a jet, doesn't it? Like, what is that, Fibonacci's principle? I don't know. I'm not that big of a science geek. But Premack Principle, let's take a look at what it means, and then we're going to distill it down. So the Premack Principle, or the relativity theory of reinforcement, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking Einstein now, states that more probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. And this is the definition from Wikipedia. Now, I could have picked 20 different definitions to bring you. This one was the one that I thought we had the most hope of understanding what it is. But I don't know about you. I know what this is, and I'm still scratching my head. Like relativity theory of reinforcement, hello? More probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. I can't get a gripster on it. So if you're as confused as me, let's take the Wikipedia definition and let's tear it up into tiny little pieces and put it in the circular file. And let's move on to our working definition, which I really pared down for you. The idea that we are more likely to engage in behavior if we're given meaningful rewards. So I want to go to the perfect example of this is the BCBA that I know that when her kids were starting school, she had this hard and fast rule in her house that there was no Kool-Aid. That Kool-Aid was just not a thing in her house. She was not going to be that kind of mom that her kids were all sugared up on artificially colored flavored water. But she also wanted to be the mom that wanted her kids to be the kind of kids who were excited to sit down and do their homework and didn't have to be cajoled into it or bribed into it or, stood over and lectured for it. That was really important. She wanted to build that skill that her kids would do their homework and enjoy it because she was an excellent student and she wanted that for her kids. So she, using Premack Principle, decided that she would make Kool-Aid available on the dining room table while you were doing your homework. If you were working on your homework, there was, like Olive Garden, it was a never-ending salad bowl of, it was a pitcher of Kool-Aid. And that's the only time, and when homework was done, the Kool-Aid would go away and it would not come back out. Now, let's visit this and go, okay, what's happening here? That that in the presence of one thing, which is a highly desirable thing, it made it something that wasn't highly desirable was more likely to happen. Because in a sense, it made it worthwhile. Or we could use Dr. Granpeesheh's phrase, it made it fair. Okay, I'm doing this homework thing, but it's fair because I get to have this other thing that I want to have while I'm here. Premack Principle at work. Now, the thing that's interesting is that we know this, that when you pair something that's really highly desirable with something else that is or is not desirable, eventually it's like the shiny from the desirable thing starts to wear off on the thing that's not shiny. My case in point is ribbon candy. I don't like ribbon candy. Do you like ribbon candy? It doesn't taste good. It's not the candy of candies, right? But I know that as a teenager and as a young adult, it wasn't the holiday to me unless we had ribbon candy. It reminded me of my great-grandmother, and it reminded me of all the things with holiday. To this day, I see ribbon candy and I'm like, oh, it is. And if I smell ribbon candy, it's just this memory of happiness, wonderfulness. And so now that is on the ribbon candy. But the fact of the matter is ribbon candy, not so good. Like I would never eat ribbon candy now. If I was going to eat candy, I'd eat something that actually tasted good. I hate to diss ribbon candy, and maybe somebody else likes it. I don't. It's not good. It tastes like a cardboard box with sugar on it, which to me is not good. So the thing with her children was that eventually, she had to put less and less Kool-Aid on the table, and her kids were doing their homework and getting good grades from it. So doing the homework itself became its own reward. Well, I'm in class and I'm not worried because I'm totally prepared, and I did the work and I understand what's happening and I'm getting good grades. That became reinforcing enough for her kids so that there was less and less Kool-Aid. And I just saw a post that her son is finishing his freshman year of college. So, it all works out. So you ask yourself, how does this help me today? What is, how can I use this principle for myself? Let's just start with ourselves, first of all. And, I have to remind myself, I had to do the taxes a couple of weeks ago. And I remember when my mother used to do the taxes, and she would get the whole table set up. And for my mother, it was a pack of cigarettes, that she had a pack of cigarettes that was there. For me, I don't smoke anymore. Haven't in a very long time. But, I set things up and cleared my decks so that it could be the most fair for me while I was doing the taxes, that I made sure that I had the thing that I wanted to drink. I made sure that I had my gum, right? Because if those things were there, it was more likely that I was going to engage in the taxes and actually get them done. So for me, Premack Principle is all about making it fair and trying to equal it out so that there are things there, things that are happening and things that will happen that ensure that the thing is going to happen. It's almost like an insurance policy of some kinds. And sometimes you find, oh, it wasn't enough. It wasn't fair enough, and so the thing didn't get done, right? But then you can always add something to it to make it fair, to make it so that the behavior is more likely to happen. Now, a couple of things that we got to consider is that it's not just about rewards, because what is rewarding to me is not necessarily rewarding to you. I always talk about Angry Birds. There was a period of time everybody was playing Angry Birds. I love a good video game. I did not get Angry Birds. And if you said to me, Shannon, if you do the taxes, you can get to play Angry Birds all day long, well, I have no problem turning that down and going, I'm not doing the taxes. I don't want to play Angry Birds. It's work. Why would I want to play Angry Birds? Somebody else, and they'd be like, yes, let me bang out the taxes, and then I get to play Angry Birds. It's so individualized, and that's why it's got to be meaningful to the individual. Whatever the thing is, if it's not, it will not maintain that balance that we're trying to get. That if this is there, that this is more likely to happen, right? But if this isn't meaningful, not going to work. Got to be meaningful rewards for the individual that are pleasurable to them. That's why the Kool-Aid, because for whatever reason, her kids, it was a treat that we get to have the Kool-Aid for the homework session. So Premack Principle, if you're dealing with anybody in your life, whether it's you, your kiddo, your significant other, somebody at work that you're like, I really want them to do this. If you start thinking to yourself, okay, how could I make that fair? What circumstance, what would need to be on board to be there to make that more likely to happen? And then you're cooking with gas. It's the Premack Principle, and it can lead to a lot of happy things. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and then we are going to be back, honestly, with one of my favorite people. She is so amazing. You're just going to love her. She has such a vibrant energy. I'm talking about autism expert Marcy Fibrow after these messages. Stick with us. Welcome back. This is one of my favorite parts of the job, when I get to introduce you to people that I just think are absolute rock stars. And my guest today, oh my goodness, she fits the bill for that. I'm talking about Marcy Fibrow. She is a clinical director here at the Center for Autism, not here, but with the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, which, you know, of course, she's a BCBA. She has been with CARD since 2009, and during her time at CARD, she has served in various roles and clinical departments. She went to Concordia University in Irvine for her undergraduate and the Chicago School of Professional Psychology for her master's degree and her BCBA program. Her passion has always been to be able to train and support other clinicians, which she's absolutely brilliant at. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her two precious daughters who I have met, and they are delightful, her husband, and volunteering at her daughter's school and in the community. We are so thrilled to invite her to the show today to talk about autism and school and what you need to know from the point of view of a BCBA. So Marcy, welcome to Autism Live. We're so thrilled and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. It's an honor to be here and get to speak about a topic I am very passionate about, as well as among many other things, but this one's near and dear to my heart.
Well, you are amazing, and I don't get the opportunity to tell you that often enough, and I'm so glad. Is this the first time that we've ever had you on the show, or did we have you on a long time ago and I'm just not remembering it?
Nope, this is the first time.
Well, that is remiss of me. Let me just say that, because you are somebody that is constantly, you know how you guys, when you're with somebody who just lights up the room and has that can-do positive attitude, that's Marcy. And we're birthday twins.
So there explains it. There you go.
We share the exact same birthday, just separated by like 50 years. That's all. So we had the opportunity to be together at our last birthday, and that's how I was like, it's your birthday too. It was very fun to be with you and share our birthdays. Anyway, so we want to talk a little bit about school. And I have to say that I literally wrote to somebody today and said, these schools are making me crazy, and crazy was all in capital letters, because I cannot believe some of the things that are happening at school. But you know what Ileana Van Sant says? She says, put your hands on your head and save yourself. So we've got you to save ourselves. So first I want to talk about IEPs, and when does a parent know that their child needs an IEP? It's a whole little thing right now. So I want your wise words as a BCBA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing to think about is maybe you've just gotten that diagnosis, or maybe you haven't yet. A lot of times for parents and families, that's a good first step, is consulting with your local school district. So at the age of 3, that is as early as you can go in and seek an evaluation, some assessments from your local district. And then those initial supports are a great first step. Do you have to accept services or the program that they're offering? No, you don't have to, but it gives you some insight and some knowledge into potentially what they're seeing for your child when it comes to their educational setting, the support systems that they'd be offering. And it gives you choices as a parent and decisions to make. So that tends to be step 1, typically, is age 3, before caregivers even think about school, right? That's typically at kindergarten, first grade pastime. So we're not even thinking about it until, 4, 5, or 6. You may start as early as 3. Another opportunity I think that comes up a lot is your child's in school and they're doing well academically in those early years, and then something happens where they start to regress or fall behind. They're not keeping up with the rigor of the academics within their classroom or in their grade level. And that's another time that parents typically start to seek out the recommendation for an IEP or their child to be assessed.
Absolutely. Can I throw a log on this fire, though, that what I'm starting to see is a third category when some of our kids aren't being looked at to get a diagnosis until much later, like teenagers. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing over and over from parents is, my child does really well in school. My child is entirely capable at school, but we're having other issues. And there are things that are happening at home, but there's also social things that are happening at school that are very overwhelming. And it's led parents to go and get the diagnosis. They get the diagnosis, but their child is considered very high functioning because the child was able to get to that age without getting a diagnosis. So the child can talk, the child can convey certain things, and they've been flying by, sometimes excelling in the academic stuff. And now they're like, I don't know, do I need an IEP? And the school, I'm sure you're seeing this too, the school says, oh no, you don't qualify for an IEP.
Right. All the time. And I think what happens a lot too is they're saying, well, why won't you accept their autism diagnosis? That comes up a lot. And that's when we get into understanding too the difference between medical diagnosis and then educational classification. So those big discrepancies come in a lot too, and having to have those conversations with caregivers as a BCBA of saying, you're right, your child has autism. That's why they get ABA. That's why we see all of these things. But because they are a severity level 1-1 and they're doing well, like you said, academically, but that pragmatic language, those social situations, the schools don't see that as something they're responsible for. They are responsible for the child's education. And if that is not impeding on their learning, then they won't necessarily provide services surrounding that. So what we might see instead is a push for, and I always recommend, well, let's talk about a 504 plan. So maybe their anxiety or their need to take additional time on a test or have some things spoken out loud to them, or anything that would give your child a little bit more flexibility in their learning environment, which we want, that least restrictive environment, that might follow into a 504 to be more appropriate, which is why the school just says no to an IEP, but let's push and talk about why a 504 plan might be a good option instead.
I love that. But I also want to say to parents, I have seen some parents fight and win to get the IEP, depending on what the need was, because in IDEA, and we're going to talk about IDEA in a second, it does say that school is supposed to be preparing your child educationally, but it's also supposed to be preparing your child to go out into the world and work and do all of
social emotional.
Yes. So love that. Okay. If your child, if you decide you've got an IEP, and your child is, for whatever reason, not going to go to their assigned school. Let's say that you're moving or you've decided to go to a private school. Does the IEP follow the child? What can you tell us about that?
Great question. And we see it all the time when we have patients starting at our centers, or I'm here in California. We have a lot of intra-district transfers happening because they want the best for their child. And they've heard about a school in a different location. So for the first part of your question was private school. Private school can be tricky because if it is truly a private school, and that could be parochial, maybe a STEM school of some kind, they are not funded by the state or by a local government agency, so they do not have to uphold your IEP. They will work with you, but they are not going to be legally obligated to uphold that IEP. So it's something I always caution to parents when they're looking at a private school. A benefit of it we can talk about too is the idea of your ABA typically can go with you. So your therapist for your child could go into that environment. So you have to weigh the pros and cons of, do I want my IEP to follow me, or do I want more one-to-one support? And I feel like I have a school environment that will support my child in that setting. Charter schools are another one that come up a lot. And I went and toured one last week with a patient of mine, and I think it will be a great fit for him. Those ones are great because his IEP will follow him, and they are obligated to fulfill the needs that are expressed in the IEP because they are funded. It's a state funded or government funded institution, and therefore they need to follow those IEPs to the best of their abilities, or negotiate and discuss what we can do to compromise and create an environment that will uphold the requests in the IEP. So they will follow you, but only in certain environments.
Amazing. So there's so many terms, and I've already used some of them in this show, shame on me. But let's talk about some of the terminology, because look, how many years have I been at this, and how many IEPs did I go to? And there are still terms that I'm like, wait a second, what does that mean again?
Yeah.
And you turned me on to a thing that I did.
An assessment.
Yes, an assessment that I was like, wait, what's that? I didn't even realize. And I see that schools are really leaning very heavily into that assessment. So
Yep.
what are the words that you try to help parents to understand that you think they're going to need the most?
Absolutely. So the favorite one I always encourage them to remember is the least restrictive environment. The school doesn't like to use it as often, but as a parent, it's like your secret weapon. It's your sword to carry when you go in, and you can always question, okay, is that the least restrictive environment for my child? And the rationale behind LRE is your child in a placement that is going to give them the most access to the things that they're able to have in a classroom setting or an educational setting, and it's non-restrictive. So a special education classroom with all peers that are also in special education, and it's all push-ins, meaning all the support systems go into their classroom. That's a very restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment would be a general education classroom. Maybe they're getting pulled out for individual support, but they're able to access their same aged peers or their typical peers for the vast majority of their school day.
Yeah. There's a page, and when people get the IEPs, it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming. You get this document, and it's 30 pages, 60 pages, 70 pages long. And I always want to, one of the first things I want to do is I want to go look for the LRE page, because I want to see what the placement is that they're recommending. And there's a form that they have to fill out saying, this is why we did this. And
Right.
often I find that piece of paper is the most redonkulous thing ever. that there will be all these things, and they'll even put it in the paragraph. This child needs this, and this, so we're recommending this, and it's the exact opposite of what they checked off. Like, I've seen that happen.
Yep.
So,
And I think a lot of the times too, they are duplicating something similar from another student. And so sometimes those are the things I'll catch always. And I know that they're human and they make mistakes, but when it's your child, and for me, when it's my patient, I have to take the emotions out of it and be the advocate for the parent. And that means I'm going to catch all those little things, because sometimes that can make the difference of a placement for a child or support that they need that just kind of got glossed over and forgotten.
absolutely. What are some of the other terms that you like for people to be the most familiar with? What's the hit parade?
The other one would be FAPE. So that's the free and appropriate public education. And I think sometimes caregivers are worried, or they don't want to ask for things that they absolutely have every right to access. And that could be something as simple as speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, a specialized PE teacher. It could mean that they're able to, pull resources from another site. But because that free and appropriate education is so important, that this is their right as a student, as a citizen, as a parent to ask and advocate for these things for a child. But I see parents cautious all the time and they're like, well, it's too much. I shouldn't ask for that. No, you absolutely should. It's your right as a parent to advocate for your child to get all these things that they need in a classroom. Left-handed scissors, a pencil gripper, special weighted things to bounce on in the classroom. Like, ask for those things. It's things that will help them and aid in their ability to learn more efficiently. You should ask for it.
Absolutely. It's hard. I think sometimes they deliberately try to make us feel bad when we're asking for something that we think that our child needs. I know that certainly happened to me, that a person came up to me at pickup and said, "Oh, can I just talk to you while you're waiting for your son to come out?" I said, "Sure." And I had no idea but she gave me this whole song and dance. She goes, "Oh, it's just a shame that, if you persist, we're not going to be able to put the computer lab in for the second graders, and it will be because we approved what you're asking for your child." And I got so heated with her and started yelling. I yelled, I raised my voice, and I said, "Are you standing here telling me that my child is not entitled to a free public education because of something that you want to budget? Is that what you literally just said to me?" She ran away from me because it was illegal what she was doing. They do not have the right to say to you, "That's too expensive." They can say a whole bunch of other stuff, like, we don't think that's appropriate for your child. We don't think your child needs that. They can say all that, and you can argue that. But if they start saying, that's a lot of money to spend on your child, that's illegal.
Exactly.
But they make us feel bad, Marcy.
Yeah. It comes up with assessments a lot, or I'll recommend ask for someone outside to assess your child. They go, "I can do that?" Yeah, absolutely. If you don't feel confident in the assessments that were completed with the district provided employee, ask, see. That's a formal request you can put in. So that's another big one. And I've seen huge buildings and bricks and things that have been moved, mountains moved, when you bring in an outside person that gives a recommendation, and the school is then obligated to follow those recommendations as well.
And tell them what that's called when you have an outside evaluator.
So typically, depending on the assessment you're looking for, we'll use BCBA for an example. So something like a functional behavior assessment, an FBA, should be conducted by a school psychologist, an educational psychologist of some kind. A BCBA, which could be within the district, but you could ask for an outside psychologist for BCBA to conduct that. And then that's going to give them a framework of the behaviors they're observing in class, the supports that we think are needed, the environment for the day and how it's structured, and where the levels of support are needed. And it's coming from a third party that's non-biased, that's going to ask for the moon if that's what they think is necessary, versus like we were just saying, okay, we're not going to recommend that because maybe we have budgetary restrictions that we don't want to say we should be offering. And it might be something like a one-to-one that they just don't have the ability to offer to you, but an outside person might say that is the best thing for this child at this time.
There we go. We get a lot of questions about assessments, Marcy, and about just exactly what you're talking about. What can the school psychologist do? What can somebody else do? And can they, we have many parents who say, "I don't have the diagnosis yet. If I submit to your lights keep going out."
I know.
Is it
the sunshine?
It's the sunshine. Okay. We just want everybody to know that's what's going on. But Marcy's fabulous, so we're rolling with it. But sometimes people will say, "Well, can the school diagnose my child?"
Right.
So let's talk about what they can do, what they do, and what they can't do.
This just happened to a patient of mine, and I called Evelyn Kung, who's a fellow colleague and amazing clinician, to be like, "Can they say this? Can they do this to my poor family and what they're going through?" And the long and the short of it is there are certain things that they're able to classify, and there are certain things that they cannot. So specifically here in California, something like autism, they cannot diagnose. And that's important to understand. Now, a classification, an educational classification, is something they can do, which is why you'll see things like intellectual disability, often referred to, dyslexia, ADHD. Those things you'll see commonly because they have within their categories as school psychologists that they're able to follow, and those will then open the doors to the specific services that are being provided. versus a medical diagnosis, something that stays with your child, that is going to carry over into all other areas of their life, but it may not carry over into the educational setting. As we referred to earlier, autism is probably one of the most common that you see where you have a medical diagnosis, but it's not carried over into the educational setting, potentially because of their severity rating, and they're considered high functioning or that level 1-1, or they academically are doing really well, but then socially they're not. They're not going to consider that as a primary diagnosis or classification on something like an IEP or a 504 plan. So to answer your question, I dug into this pretty deeply recently, and some things they can and some things they cannot. But I want caregivers to feel confident that that is just one opinion and one set of assessments, and always feel confident in your ability to seek outside medical diagnosis. Because to me, even as a parent myself, my daughter has an IEP and she received the ADHD diagnosis from the school, but I know that I want to go out and seek consult and a formal diagnosis medically as well to feel confident in everything that we're doing for her in both a home setting and an academic setting.
Yeah. You know, I'm a former teacher. I'm somebody who worked in the public school system, and, you know, I have great faith in educators, and I think that most people who make their living as an educator, they're doing it out of a sense of passion. It is very rare that although every once in a while I would run into somebody that, you know, we'd be sitting around in the teacher's lounge talking about our day and what we loved about it or what was hard, right? But you saw the passion that was there. And every once in a while, somebody would, you know, you'd say to them, how did you get into teaching? And I remember once in my whole teaching career, somebody said, well, I just wanted the summers off. And you just saw everybody turn and go, one of these things really doesn't belong. Yeah. And you know what? That person didn't stay teaching for very long because there wasn't enough in it for them having the summer off. You got to love this job, right?
Absolutely.
And,
yes.
And I think that most educators, not all, most educators are well-intentioned people that want to do well and work with somebody. I will tell you that the people who decide that teaching doesn't pay enough are the people who go on to be administrators. I have so much less love for them. Now, they're not all horrible. And somebody recently on YouTube called me out and said, you know, there's this strife between parents and school, and I feel like you're furthering that, Shannon, and you're making it so that people think that school is terrible. Not at all. But
no, absolutely not.
Not at all. But I do want for parents to understand and be empowered by knowing that the school is going to make recommendations. And as you said, we have a responsibility as a parent to also be looking at things and have the conversation. Just because school says something doesn't mean you've been voted off the island.
Exactly. Exactly. You are part of that IEP team as much as the teacher. That anyone else that's in that room, you are part of the IEP team as well. That's another good piece of advice I give to parents. You are the parent. You are to me, you are the leader of that team, and you know your child best and advocate for them in that. You matter just as much as any other person sitting at that table.
Amen to that. Although the school will act like it is their IEP meeting and that they're running it, I always like to bring baked goods because I feel like that throws them off balance. And it's so funny to me at my son's schools, all the ones that he was at, they must have said something to them like, you're not allowed to eat anything she brings until the meeting is over and you
just
can take it with you. So I would bring the smelliest, like fragrant muffins, and I would have the vat of Starbucks coffee there, but I would get one that was regular and one that was like hazelnut, so it would torture them throughout the whole meeting.
The smell was there. They needed it.
The smell was there. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about ABA is considered a medically necessary treatment, and how does that impact and interact with education and the school system, and what's the 411 about what we need to know about that?
Yeah, so this has come up. I've been doing this for almost 15 years, and I remember being an aide with patients in the school setting, and just the evolution of ABA and being accepted in a school setting has changed dramatically over the years. Where we stand right now is ABA is medically necessary. This is where those two don't always mesh and cross over well together for two reasons. One, sometimes your insurance or your payer for your child's insurance does not agree with us being in an academic setting. And so they will say, you cannot offer this service there. Others are okay with it. Other BCBAs will advocate for the rationale of why we're there, what we're able to support, that we're not touching the academics. We're solely there to support the child behaviorally, socially, emotionally, and be that layer of additional support in the school setting. The schools also don't always like us being in there because some districts have their own version, their IBI, their instructional behavioral aides, and have BCBAs that oversee them, and they don't want the overlap within that as well. So those are all things to consider when you're looking at a school placement and setting of what do they already offer, what are they okay with offering. But what we're also seeing is we're encouraging families, if they don't feel like their school setting and placement is an appropriate fit, and they just don't feel like the traditional school setting in general is an appropriate fit, that instead their child would be coming to ABA and getting their medically necessary treatments. And that could be under a variety of different things. So some things we've seen is, again, I will reference California because that's where I am and what I'm familiar with, is we have students that are enrolled in a statewide homeschooling program. That curriculum is sent to the family, and that's something the family is working on, and they're meeting their needs academically to be a registered student, but then they're in our clinic setting, or they're getting home-based or community-based services, and it just fits their needs better and is the most appropriate thing for them at the time. I have other students that leave school early and the school accepts it. This is my patient. He leaves about 90 minutes early every day so that he can maximize his ABA treatment. And they've accepted a letter from us saying that this is his medically necessary treatment and it doesn't impact his attendance for those days. They're not considered parties, and they've been very flexible with us. So I think just being open and honest and having a good conversation about the needs of your child and what's best for them is place number one to start. And then from there, determining how can I embed ABA into this, because we want that medically necessary treatment for them, especially when they're at that really early intervention stage. And it's just so important to be as consistent and maximize the clinically recommended hours that you're given.
I just love how creative over the years parents have gotten. And at some point, somebody said to me, well, why don't you spend a minute and just think about what you think your child needs? And then let's work from there, right? And it was scary to me because I was like, well, but I'm not 100% sure that I know what is right. But I was a teacher, so I think I had a little bit of a leg up there. I know other parents that go and seek out an educational consultant, or they go to their BCBA and say, what does my child need to be working on right now? So you have those people that you can lean into. But I will say that anytime I stopped for a second and thought, okay, what would I like to see educationally, then that opportunity came about. Now, sometimes it was that we fought for it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was somebody that said, oh, you know what program you're talking about is this? And then I went and looked and went, oh, that's how I found his high school, was that I was like, oh, this is exactly what I have been looking for. But I do think it's important for parents to think of it from that side, because from school, and again, I've worked at school, school says, okay, we have a group of kids that are going to need something. Let's create a program. And it's well-intentioned. Right. Let's create a program. And I've told the story many times. Those of you who know the wonderful advocate, Emily Island, and her fabulous son, Tom Island, who is on our show on a regular basis now. He's a speaker and an author and a Toastmaster International. Great, great guy. But it just so happened that my son was going to school in the same community where Tom had gone 12 years before. And when Tom was there with a wonderful Emily Island, they said, oh, because she said, this program is not appropriate for my son. What else do you have in your bag of tricks? They didn't have anything. So they built a program.
Around him and his needs.
Exactly, which is individualized, right? And then Tom graduated, went on to become a CPA, and then eventually a speaker. But in the meantime, they kept doing the Tom Island program. And they would fit kids in. And they tweaked and added a couple of more programs to fit this kid and this kid and this kid. But then along comes my son, and my son didn't fit into the Tom Island program or any of the other 5 kids whose parents had gone, no. So I had to fight. I had to fight with them for it. But now people who come to the school, I'm sure that's one of the things on the list. Or you could have my son's program. But we all need to remember as parents that that's not really how it works.
Exactly.
That your child does not have to fit into that program. You know, the one I've been hearing lately is people telling me that their kids are being shipped an hour away because that's where the program is. That's not it
and
either.
that one always breaks my heart. Or the school bus for hours, and that's when I just have that parent go, what do you feel like is best for your child right now? I think they just feel like school in their local district is just so important. And when, like you said, when they stop and think about what is really the important thing right now, and it's that my child is loved, cared for, and happy at the end of the day, right? I love when the parents start to hit the place of like, it's not about the academics, it's about their abilities, and I want them to be happy. Amen. Yeah. Let's find that space for them and what that looks like. And it's probably not going to be your local school, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
It is okay. I love that now people are doing those homeschool programs. There's a couple of schools that are out there that allow you to set it's one-to-one school, and it's, because I know there's some of us who are like, oh, I don't want to do the homeschool thing. But there's one-to-one school, and you can set your hours. You can tell them, this is when I would like my child to go to school. Brightmont, and that a lot of those schools, like Brightmont, are having wonderful success getting the school to pay for that program. They'll go in and fight it for you. It's like, woo.
I have a good, happy success story with something like that. We have a learner that Lisa and I worked with for years, and she finished high school in 18 months using a similar program.
Wow.
She's minimally verbal. She communicates, via letterboard. And it was just the most phenomenal thing. I got to go watch her high school graduation speech, and to see her go through high school in such a short amount of time using that one-to-one system and having an ABA aide with her at all time to help and support just her as a support system and a communication partner. It was the most powerful thing, versus if she'd gone through the traditional system, she wouldn't have had the same outcome. Like, I can guarantee that right now. But her parent advocating and fighting and always finding the best placement for her led to this amazing success and her feeling confident. And she's going to college right now. And it's just the most amazing thing.
It is, and I get frustrated sometimes when I hear things that a parent will come back and say that the school told them. But I will say that one of the most empowering things that I realize now that I didn't realize at the time is that when you go to the IEP meeting, especially the beginning, they will hand you a document that says parental rights. And often I found that I had like 7 of them tucked into books, didn't crack it open, didn't read it, didn't know that all the good stuff is in there. All the really good stuff is in there. And then later on, they don't bother giving it to you. They say, we're just letting,
Would you like to read your procedural safeguards read to you again? Yeah.
Yeah. And then they check off that they offered it to you, but it has good information in that. Do you know what else I just found out? And you probably already knew this because you're so smart. But I didn't know until like 2 weeks ago that for every state, because IDEA is the law of the land, that what they haven't funded it entirely, but what they did fund, which I never knew, is that every state has to have at least one center that is a place where parents can go to ask for help for IEPs legally. And in California, because California is such a big state, there's like 13 of them. And it's all free. It's all free.
That's amazing.
We did a show in which we featured it, but you can write me if you want the link, because then you can go to each state and you can look, and they have it in different languages.
That's amazing.
And they have free webinars, and they have services that if they feel that you need something beyond what they have, that they'll refer you to lawyers and advocates and things of that nature. But a whole bunch of free classes that you can take so that you can get personally good at this stuff. I didn't know it existed.
No, I didn't either. That's good to know. And I would like links so I can refer it to parents. I think the other big one I always recommend is taking the emotions out of advocacy. Wright Law's book is like a Bible to me. And every time before I attend an IEP, my own child as well, I crack it open and I reread my favorite chapters. Because I know the idea of hiring an advocate or, God forbid, having to hire a lawyer, it's scary and it's a big step. And so I always encourage parents to educate themselves the best that we can first, but know that you have those other options as well. Someone like an advocate, that's their job. They know the legality and the ins and outs so well. And it just brings that layer of support to an IEP meeting that things get done, even if they're part 4. We're about to do part 4 of my patient's IEP next week. And that's okay too. Don't sign it until you feel confident. Take your time and ask questions. I mean, that's the other big piece. I always encourage them to feel like they can ask questions and explain that to me. Like, they go so quickly and they cover so much that they just assume you're understanding and take advantage of that sometimes, I feel.
I don't hear information well. It's not the best way for me to take information in. So somebody had taught me the trick that sometimes the school will ask for your permission. They have to get you to sign off on that they're going to do assessments, right? And whenever you're filling one of those out, you send the email and say, I signed off on the assessment, but I would like the results, the written report, 48 hours before the IEP. Now, they don't always do it. I discovered that some people can't manage their time. But then when the tape recorders turn on, I say, I just want to note that I asked for this report in writing, and I'm just now getting it. So, then everybody's
at least we're trying.
Yep. But most of the time, they ride the people, whoever is in charge of the team rides the people so that you get them
to complete everything.
And it's great because then you get to read it at home with your feet up and understand. Yep. And I would get all my little Post-it note the arrow Post-it notes, and I'd be like, this color for this, because that's how I would geek out. Red is for this is wrong. Yellow is for this is where I have a question. Green is where I want to compliment them and agree, right? And I would have the little tabs, and I go, let's turn to page 13.
Perfect.
Because now
even
I'm
for them, they're
the
like,
meeting.
what goal number? Where am I? And you getting us all on the same page and orienting the same direction. But that's where you need to be the leader in having an agenda, like you said. Like, you are the person that should be helping lead and articulate those questions and move the direction in the way that you feel like is going to be the most beneficial for their time.
And they
Let's
don't
not talk about
that,
this goal. I agree with it. Let's move on. Like, next one.
Yes, and give compliments when they're there. It's as a dad once said to me, it's all kabuki theater. Everybody's putting on a mask. I always find that interesting. And then the masks come off at the end of the meeting. And I would say, okay, we're going to take this home and review this because I don't sign there. And I would say, and please eat these muffins and donuts. And everybody dives into them because the masks are off. And
they can be more relaxed.
Isn't it crazy? But I think, tell me if you feel this, because you shared that, one of your daughters has an IEP. There is something about it that when you go into an IEP and you don't feel confident, it's the worst. But if you go into an IEP meeting clear on what it is that you want to accomplish for your child and you make even headway towards that, there is something that's so empowering as a parent to feel like, I just showed up for my kid. It feels good. Don't you agree?
It does. And I think I, even as a professional doing this, going into my first one, I was like, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to share. Like, I started second guessing myself even. And then when you do find that error or you do not agree with something, you feel more empowered. And essentially like rewriting a goal together and saying, I want to do this collaboratively, but I don't agree with something. Walking away, I felt so much better. And then the second go around, I didn't sign it for probably over a month. Had some colleagues look at it, had a friend that's a teacher look at it. Like, I wanted all the input, and that's my right. And I didn't feel obligated to rush that because, like you said, being proud of knowing I did everything I could for my child, and I'm going to also keep an eye on it. That's my last piece of advice is unfortunately hear all the time from parents, I only see my IEP team at our annual. I never hear from them other than that. you should be getting progress reports.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart every time I find out they're like, they didn't meet these goals. Well, what did their progress report say? I never got a progress report. So that's my other piece of advice. I am constantly checking in with my daughter's special academic instructor. How is she doing? Can you show me some data? Why isn't she making progress? What are we doing to modify things to give her additional support? I am the squeaky wheel and I annoy her, I'm sure, but I need to know that they're doing everything they can to help her make that progress. That's their job.
Yeah.
And those progress reports are there to tell you if they're doing it or not.
Well, and it's a violation of compliance if they don't. And I'm always shocked because I was always babysitting it, and I think that's what you need to do is you need to babysit the progress and babysit that the things that they're saying they're giving your child that they're actually doing. I'm amazed sometimes that a parent will come to me and say, well, it says on the IEP that they get this much speech, but then it was on Mondays and it got canceled all the time. And I go, but it says this many minutes.
Yes.
So that you get those many minutes, and if they aren't able to do it within the school year, they have to give it during the summer, or if they have to pay someone else to do it. That's non-compliance.
Right. Or individual versus group. That happens a lot too. If it says they're in a group setting versus an individual setting, and they're like, oh, they're always only with a group. Nope. Look here. It says 60 minutes, individual. That's what you should be receiving right now.
And that is a legal document. That stuff is owed to your kid. And anytime they're not doing it, that's non-compliance. And if you know that verbiage to say to them, that's non-compliance, they all understand that. That's like, oh, lawyers are about to get involved and it's going to cost us. So it is our responsibility as parents to babysit that document, know what our child is getting, get those. If you don't get the benchmarks, because you're supposed to get a total of 4 for the year, if you're not getting them, that's non-compliance. So important. We usually got them the same time that we got the report card, because I think the school just set it up that way so it's easy. You're getting the report card, plus you're getting the benchmarks. So the
progress report.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, it brings back such memories. I was talking to a parent yesterday who was going into an IEP meeting, and I said, I don't ever have to do that again. I don't ever have to do that again. And I know most parents, when they get to that point for their last IEP, they celebrate. Like, that is a thing to celebrate, that we did that. We don't have to do that anymore. It's a fabulous and glorious thing. Marcy, you're amazing.
Thank you, Shannon.
And we so appreciate you and all that you do and the heart that you bring to it. You are a true professional, and I'm so grateful to know you and grateful to know that there are families out there that are having the benefit of you. Now, we didn't really talk about this, but you're a clinical director at CARD, and each clinical director has a sort of thing that they specialize in. And as much as you do this, and you are an expert and we all refer to you, we didn't even talk about SKIA. We probably should talk about that too. Now we're going to run over. But what is your specialty as a clinical director?
So at CARD, we have something called group clinical managers. So every clinic site has a clinical manager, and they typically oversee 3 to 4 clinics. So I oversee the group clinical managers and their ongoing training and support that they receive. They're wonderful clinicians, but they need to be mentored and supported as well. And that is our goal, and our focus is to provide them with that ongoing training and support. It can be on a local level. I'll oversee patients in their centers and check in with them. But my big passion, like I said, is training. So a lot of development, a lot of coordination with our training departments and the various other clinical directors. So I like to think of myself as, the kind of stretch Armstrong and going in multiple different directions. But it means that I get to work with everybody, which is what I love.
You're Elastigirl.
Yes.
That's what you are, Elastigirl. So now I'm going to backtrack for a second. So there's an assessment that you taught me about last fall. And then I've been talking about it on the show, but tell people what this assessment is.
So this assessment is called the SKIA, and essentially the whole focus of this is to determine if your child would qualify or benefit from a one-to-one aide. And they don't like to offer it typically. It's not something that's, just volunteered as an assessment they're going to do. But as a caregiver, you're wanting that one-to-one support, because if your child's in ABA, you see the benefit of that. You see the importance of it. And I always ask for them to do this assessment. Again, I strongly recommend that you have an outside professional do it, because they're going to think about all potential possibilities for your child and not be thinking about budgetary needs. But the goal here is that we walk away from this assessment saying, yes, this child will benefit from a one-to-one. Safety is the biggest reason. I feel strongly that safety is something that you need to shout in these IEP meetings, because that's something they can't argue with. Things like pica, elopement, any form of aggression or self-injurious behaviors, anything that is a danger to themselves or others, that should be a focus for them, because they want to ensure that your child's being kept in a safe environment and is safe on their own when they're walking around that campus. So that SKIA assessment is a great keep in the back of your pocket, ask for it. You'll see the big eyes come out of like, I don't know if that's necessary. And you can list those reasons why you feel like your child would benefit from having this assessment done.
I heard one today that I'd not heard before. It was a parent who is getting ready for their child to go to kindergarten. So the child has been getting their ABA and not been in preschool. So the school did an assessment of their child, but of course did not do the SKIA. Dad didn't know about the SKIA. The school came back, Dad didn't like it, so they had an IEE, an independent educational evaluation. At that point, he asked that person about the SKIA, and that person told them, no, that would have to be done at the school, which I disagreed with. But now the school is saying to Dad, well, let the child come to school in the fall, and then we have to be able to see them in the school setting before we can do the SKIA. So we'll do it once they have come here in the fall. Cool. But there are concerns about pica
with the safety
and safety. And so Dad was saying, I don't know what to do. Now, I'd love your advice, because what I suggested to Dad is tell them, you have 2 reports here that state clearly that the child has pica and other issues that are safety issues. So, why don't you, here, let's make an agreement here that you write it into the IEP that for 6 weeks, there will be a one-to-one aide while you are doing the evaluation, and then at 6 weeks, we will reevaluate.
Perfect.
Is that what you would recommend?
Absolutely. Another one to look at, and this, it depends on the district and how they feel about this, but an individual health plan. I've seen pica used for that as well, because it's a health concern. They could be ingesting things that they're not supposed to. Health plans can also be used for a variety of reasons, but I've had success with that one as well when it came to pica. And then that also helped with the one-to-one aide or a medical professional, someone that was there to observe and make sure the patient was kept safe.
There we go. Gosh, it's so overwhelming to think about. But step by step, we get there. And and I've found parents are so resourceful, and they'll find a way. Create a program, make a program, find the program, whatever it is, talk the school into the program. A way is always found, which is kind of amazing to think about. So don't be overwhelmed. But anyway, thank you so much, Marcy. You're absolutely amazing. We're so grateful to have you and your expertise. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I hope we get to spread this knowledge to as many parents as possible.
We trying. We are for sure trying. All right, you go and have a wonderful rest of your day. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. Such a delight. We're out of time here, guys, but let me just tell you about a little bit of the rest of this week, because we're getting down to it now, aren't we? So tomorrow, I get to welcome another wonderful expert that I absolutely adore. Jen Yakos is going to be with us, and she, oh my goodness, has so much information that's so good to share with you. You won't even believe it. Then on Friday, for the first time ever on the show, we will be welcoming Christine and Abby Romeo. They're the mom and daughter from the hit Netflix show Love on the Spectrum. It's their first time. Abby's been on the show before because we've shown her music videos, but it's the first time we've ever interviewed her, and she is luscious. Nobody tells it like it is better than Abby. We're going to talk about mermaids, and we're going to talk about the hats that she's making. So you'll want to tune in for that. Then on Monday, licensed marriage and family therapist Vince Redmond is going to be there to help all of us to deal with all the emotions that we're feeling. It's a real part of it. You know, there's real documented stress for being a parent of an individual on the spectrum. A lot of times that gets misconstrued. It's not our kids that are stressing us out. It's the stuff like the IEPs and getting the insurance company to fund the ABA, all that stuff. And because we want to show up for our kids in a meaningful way, and sometimes we're not sure how to do that, and that's emotional. So Vince is going to help us to stay on the steady and keep ourselves healthy. And then for the final show of the month, Dr. Grant Pichet is going to be with us doing, the topic will be building language. How can we always be building language and encouraging communication, so you won't want to miss that. That's next Tuesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.